Hi everyone, Kuni here from Black Magic Games. Today we're going over Hearthhull, the World Seed. This Precon is pretty strong out of the box, but there are a few cheap upgrades we can make to really kick its game up another notch. So the first and foremost cuts we want to make, if you only have 20 bucks, this is what you want to do. You get rid of the Scouring Swarm, and you get rid of Urg Spawn of Turg, and we're going to put in Wrenn and 6 and Life from the Loam. These run you about $20 together, but they're a huge increase in the power of the deck because of how you can recur the lands over and over. Wrenn and 6 isn't even a particularly threatening planeswalker, I find. Most people don't attack it aggressively, so sometimes there are games where you will be able to get the emblem off, and once you do that, it's game over. If you have $50, we're going to move on. We're going to get rid of Groundskeeper. It really is not a useful card, and once you have a Life from the Loam or a Wrenn and 6, you're never going to need this thing again. And we're going to add some more removal in the form of Abrupt Decay, Culling Ritual, and Assassin's Trophy, replacing Binding of the Old Gods and Lonecrafter Fawn. These three are really strong pieces of removal. Culling Ritual especially cleans up all small creatures and things like treasure tokens from someone's Smothering Tithe, so it's pretty useful. Assassin's Trophy hits just about everything, and I'm sure I don't need to explain why Abrupt Decay is good. Following that, we're going to get rid of Hammer of Purpose for Ramunap Excavator, another way to recur the lands from your graveyard. Mazarek, Crawl Death Priest for Vraska Golgari Queen. This is an interesting decision because Vraska is good at letting you sacrifice permanents like lands for Hearthhull, and she also functions as a form of removal for lower costed cards, just like Abrupt Decay. You're almost never going to emblem her, but it's cool to have the option in case you get to that point. Braid's Arisen Nightmare for Lotus Cobra. Lotus Cobra is awesome with all the fetch lands in the deck, and it can really accelerate you way ahead of the curve. And finally, for the last of the $50, we're going to get rid of Wastes, Dakmor Savage, Myriad Landscape, and Eumidian Hatchery for a couple more different lands. Nurturing Peatland, it functions as a draw engine in the deck alongside Life of the Loam or Wrenn and 6, while also counting as a sacrifice for your Hearthhull. Caveron Memorial World. This is a pretty cool new land from Edge of Eternities that lets you make your lands into robots. Kind of useful. It counts as a sacrifice for Hearthhull, and it gives your other creatures haste, which can be really deadly when you count these last two lands in our deck, Thespian Stage and Dark Depths. If you've never played with them before, the way it works is like this. Thespian Stage makes a copy of the Dark Depths, and then immediately sees that it is a Dark Depths that doesn't have any ice counters on it. Since you have two Dark Depths in play, you have to pick one to sacrifice and one to keep due to the legend rule, so you sacrifice the real Dark Depths and keep the Thespian Stage. Then Thespian Stage triggers, goes, hey, I don't have any counters on it, I'm going to sacrifice this and make a Marit Lage, which is the 20/20 flying and indestructible. So for 2 mana and a land, gets you a couple Hearthhull triggers, gets you a 20/20 flying indestructible. That's a pretty huge upgrade for $5. If you have a little more money to spend, we're going to another $50 here, so $100 total. There are some more changes you'd be well advised to make. We can cut the Putrefy because we already added such good black-green removal that this is really unnecessary. Jury, Master of the Review, because it takes a while to grow her since we don't have real fetch lands like Wooded Foothills or Verdant Catacombs. The fetch lands that are in the deck already are fine, they're just not as efficient at growing Jury. Eumidian Wastewalker can go. It's an okay card. I don't think it's great. When looking for cuts, it was a pretty easy one to make. Same with Baloth Prime. It really doesn't do that much. It is an extra way to sacrifice lands, but we can do better than that. Augur Vardum, Centaur Vinecrasher, Formless Genesis, Multani Yavimaya's Avatar, Worldbreaker, and World Soul's Rage wrap out the last of our cuts here. And we're going to replace them with Use Social Engineering, Field of the Dead is a game changer, and Field of the Dead is busted. What if I told you that for a whole price of a quarter, you could get a Field of the Dead effect and you could make a robot army? It's really strong to be able to have that option in a bracket 2 deck. Tanuk, Memorial Ensign. He triggers off of all your lands coming into play, like when you sacrifice a fetch land, and he gets you a couple extra cards drawn. So the damage for him can really add up, especially if you have a fully crewed Hearthhull. Zuran Orb, it's probably the most efficient sacrifice outlet for your lands that we have access to. The life gain is okay. It can keep you around in grindy games, but what really makes it good is when you combine it with Shifting Woodland and Spelunking. Now, at first glance, you might be wondering, why are we running Spelunking? Do the lands that come in untapped really matter that much? And the answer is yes, they do, but they especially matter when you have the Zuran Orb and the Shifting Woodland. With Aftermath Analyst already in the deck, if you have enough lands in play, you can get Aftermath Analyst into the graveyard and have Shifting Woodland become a copy of it. So with Shifting Woodland and Spelunking in play, and an outlet like Zuran Orb around too, you make Shifting Woodland into a copy of the Aftermath Analyst, sacrifice all your lands, and then sacrifice the Shifting Woodland Aftermath Analyst and bring them all back. And you can do it over and over again to gain as much life as you'd like and get as many Hearthhull triggers as you would like. It's a pretty strong combo to have access to. It's a bit of a Rube Goldberg machine because you need a lot of lands in play, a crewed Hearthhull, and the Aftermath Analyst around. So it doesn't really come up too often, except in grindy games where you can naturally assemble all the pieces. Following that up, we've got Toxic Deluge. It's the best sweeper we have access to. Damnation is a little bit too expensive for the rest of the deck, but at $8, Toxic Deluge does a ton of work. Faithless Looting, perfect card draw engine, especially with Life in the Loam. You get to discard a couple lands, draw a couple cards, turn them into something useful. Deathrite Shaman, the best mana dork ever printed. He's a form of graveyard hate, he's a form of ramp, he's a form of life gain if you need that to happen. He can mess up all kinds of opponents' graveyard interaction combos. So it's really great to have access to this card in green-black. And then finally, and this is probably my most controversial pick, Grove of the Burn Willows and Punishing Fire. Punishing Fire deals 2 damage to a creature or player, and whenever an opponent gains life, you can pay a red to get it back from your graveyard to your hand. The cool thing with Grove of the Burn Willows is that when it taps for a red, each opponent gains a life, which triggers the Punishing Fire, and you can rebuy it and use it over and over. It's slow, but it's a nice form of removal against things like an opposing Deathrite Shaman, or against people who have commanders that are really low to the ground. The potential to lock someone out of the game is really strong, so I like to include it in all my lands-based decks because of how unique the interaction is and how useful it can be having access to small creature removal like that whenever you want it. Alright, so that's about it for today's Hearthhull budget upgrades. But in the video description below, I've included a link to my deck list that includes additional options you might want to consider. Just cheap things like Tireless Provisioner, which I think is 50 cents. So it's nothing that's going to break the bank. And as a bonus, I've also included ways to take the deck up to bracket 3 or even to bracket 4 if that's your preferred power level. With that being said, thanks a lot for watching. Please make sure to like and comment and subscribe. Any of that helps out a new channel like mine a lot. And we'll see you next time.